Good evening, everyone. My name is Wanda Willis, and I am the Director of Community Engagement and Inclusion at the Cummer Museum of Art and Gardens. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. First of all, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Wells Fargo, for making this evening and the virtual experience possible for all of our viewers this evening. If you haven't had a chance yet to stop by the museum to visit the exhibition Imprisoned but Empowered Cheyenne Warriors, you really want to make time to come by. The exhibition will be on display until early in the spring, so I hope you'll take a moment to come and enjoy the exhibition. I'm very pleased this evening to introduce to you Gordon Yellowman for what I know will be quite an engaging lecture, followed by an opportunity for question and answers. Mr. Yellowman is currently Director of Language and Culture Program, Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes, and has extensive knowledge of Cheyenne history, customs, traditions, and religious beliefs. He has curated 5 exhibitions, including the one on display at the Cummer right now, on various cultural and art topics of Cheyenne and Arapaho arts and traditional arts. So tonight you are all in for a treat as we learn more about Cheyenne history. So I present to you this evening, Gordon Yellowman. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to serve as the lead curator in this exhibition regarding the Cheyenne ledger drawings and also those warriors that were imprisoned at Fort Marion. My name is, in Cheyenne, my Cheyenne name is Hewayano, which means Yellowhawk. And I am a chief of the Cheyenne tribe, the Council of 44, the Peacemakers. And so our family lineage has been involved in a lot of the traditional ways of life among the Cheyenne people. My family, it has belonged to the chieftainship for many generations. And so when I first thought about these warriors that were imprisoned, I went over and looked at their artwork and found it very, I was very impressed, but I was also very emotional about how they were able to create such beautiful work while being imprisoned. And as I became involved in this as a curator, I was very interested in wanting to know exactly what they were interpreting, what their drawings were saying, and what they were accounting for. And so I come to learn that they were recording and drawing actual historical accounts on their personal journey to Fort Marion, but also when they were in prison, they were recording the history, the scenes of their traditional homelands, the areas that they camped, the areas that they lived in, and the communities, but also they were highlighting where they lived on the Central Plains, in the Plains region. And so they were actually providing Polaroid images of their work. And that was giving us an opportunity to capture to try to understand what they captured in that, drawing that scene. So here I'm beginning my presentation, and here when I first started to study ledger art, I asked my wife, what is this ledger art? What does it mean? And she said, well, the best way or the best thing you can do is, if you really want to get interested in learning about ledger art, you need to go see these ledger books and these collections. So here I am in New York with my daughter, Cricket Yellowman. She was about 6 years old when I went to New York. And I'm looking at the Little Fingernail ledger book. And the Little Fingernail ledger book is a ledger book that was drawn by the warrior Little Fingernail. And you can see when I was looking at it, there's a bullet hole through that book. And so it was ledger drawings of what he and other warrior societies were drawing in this book. And it ended up in this museum in New York. So that began my research and looking at these ledger books, looking at these ledger collections. The next one, I went to the Colorado Historical Society and I looked at the Cheyenne dog soldiers. Hotamataneo is what the Cheyenne say. Hotamataneo, dog soldier. I looked at that ledger book at the Colorado History Museum. It's in the collections there. And that depicts images of the Battle of the Summit Springs. And the dog soldiers there, they were White Horse, and they were other warriors that drew images in that book. And then I went to the National Washington, D.C. to the Smithsonian, and I looked at their ledger drawings as well. And then I went on down to the Sam Noble Oklahoma Museum of Natural History here local in Norman, and I looked at the Fort Reno ledger book. So that's when I started really understanding what these warrior artists and all of these ledger books were depicting, were drawing, and also were providing historical information. So I began to really study these ledger books. In this exhibition, we're highlighting 3 Cheyenne artists, and their bear's heart. Nokohist, that's how we say his name. Noko is bear, hist is heart. And so it's Nokohist, bear's heart. And he has several images in this exhibition that we were showing and exhibiting in this exhibition of the prisoners that were in prison there. And the next one was Making Medicine. Making Medicine was a warrior, and he was also of Cheyenne that came from the Watonga community, the Watonga district, and that community was called the Scabby Band people. And then he also later on became part of the Whirlwind Band, and the Whirlwind Band is where he came from. And they gave him a name. It was translated as Oca Hater. And Making Medicine was a sun dancer. He was a ceremonial priest among the Cheyenne tribe. Next. And I'll talk more about his family. But here is one of the images of Bear's Heart that's in the exhibition. And you know, my way of understanding what's going on here is to really look at the details, the colors, and also the just the representation of itself. And here, you know, here when I looked at this ledger drawing, I look at this. You see this teepee right in the center, and it has a star here with the yellow teepee flaps, smoke flaps. And that star represents the morning star. And the morning star, the morning travelers. And that's the image that we know and we use when we recognize designs and images associated with certain bands. And that's the morning star travelers. And then here you see the procession. You see the women here that is watching on, they're looking on, watching the parade. And these parades, as the warriors would come in, there would be 300 or 400 horses on warriors as they came into the campground, the ceremonial circle of our encampments. And it said that, you know, when you could see each of these military societies ride their horses in this procession, they said each society would sometimes take an hour to come in. And they said the dust would be so thick, you could see all the warriors wearing their regalia and parading in on their horses. And when they came in, everybody stopped and watched. And that's what you're seeing here is these ladies, they're looking on and paying attention to these warrior societies as they go in their procession. And so down here, you see the chiefs with the lawn trailer war bonnet, and you see the society spears with these lances and the eagle feathers that's adorned with yellow horsehair. And then here you have them wrapped with red cloth. And so they're marching, and they're carrying their lance, they're dressed in their finest with whatever regalia that was associated with that society, whether it be the dog soldiers, the kit fox, the bowstrings, or the hoof rattlers, and then the chiefs. And then we here on the bottom, you see there's 5 horses. Now, when I interpret these drawings, is that the same warrior? I have to question that. Is that the same person, or is that two individuals that's highlighting themselves twice because of the action, the marching of the horse? Or is it one person kind of imitating the passing in front of people? And so if you look at it, all of these things are pretty similar. You have the same blanket on the horse, the fringe, the same blanket here, and then here and here and here. Then you have he's got yellow leggings on here, and then he's got yellow leggings on here. And then here he's got the red leggings, and here the red leggings and the yellow. So was this 3 separate motions of the same warrior? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, because of the designs on these. This was this person here, and then this was him again when he had on his combs. So to me, when I look at this image, it's 2 warriors on 2 horses, and it's one that's showing the action. So that's my interpretation of what could be happening. And the other one is, oh, you could just say, oh, it's a separate warrior. They're all riding the white horse. And I kind of find that, is that really happening? Did they really have 5 white horses in this procession? So these are some of the questions that I ask myself when I'm interpreting these drawings. And then you have the teepee here, you have the red shields, the red shield warrior teepee with the morning star again here. And then as they went in the procession, the horses follow, as I said, and they would be 200-300. And then you have, and see here, you have to ask yourself, up here on top, the horses are white too. Now, the question in this interpretation of this drawing is, why didn't he color the horse on all this drawing? Maybe he chose not to highlight and contrast the warrior that's on the horse. Or another thing is, or are they white horses? So those are questions that I ask myself when I interpret these drawings and look at them. What was he saying? What were they doing? And there was reasons why they depicted these certain colors. And maybe he chose not to color the horses different colors because maybe he didn't have access to certain colors at that time when he was producing this drawing. Here you have a plain teepee, white teepee. Here a plain white teepee. But here it's red on top and blue on top. So he chose to kind of balance this drawing with how he was coloring the images. And then maybe he said, okay, I'll come back and color this in when I get ready to get it finished. But that never happened. So the procession goes on. You have all the warrior societies parading in, dressed in their finest. And are they coming in from a battle? That's one question. Are they coming into the encampment and the ceremonial circle when all the societies come in and show their presence? Or are they getting ready to go out on a battle? Are they parading out, or are they coming in? Those are some of the questions you have to ask yourself when you're interpreting these drawings. And then the other thing too is, in all of the research I've done on ledger books, I looked at many of them, all of the action always goes from right to left, from right to left. And the reason for it is because the page in the book is down here, and that represents the ground. That's the earth, that's the bottom. And so it's not just a drawing of how it's being represented or being depicted here. There's reasons why they're doing it that way. And then the other one is, if you notice, in the other ledger drawings, the horse is always a stallion. It's never a mare. It's never a female horse. And that depicts the association with that warrior, because the warrior and the horse become one, physically and spiritually. They become one. And so that's kind of some of the things we know traditionally as far as our ways and customs of how we do things in our societies. And so that was kind of my interpretation. Next. Okay, here as I'm talking more about making medicine. Making medicine, as I said, Oca Hater. He was a ceremonial Sundance priest. He participated in the Cheyenne Sundance, and his logo is of the Cheyenne Sundance Lodge. That was his glyph that he uses to identify that he was the artist in the ledger drawing. And that glyph is seen in many of his drawings. And so here is my drawing of the Sundancer and the Oca Hater. And this is how we worship in the Sundance. And if you see, it's very interesting here when we ceremonially paint our bodies in the ceremony. I did this drawing depicting Oca Hater as a Sundancer, but also a Sundance priest. And so what I did was I just imagined him and myself. I'm a Sundancer. I'm a Sundance priest. So I've been through the ceremonial Sundance Lodge, and I started in the 1970s. And my father, a generational, he was the chief Sundance priest for the Cheyenne for 35 years. And he started Sundancing when he was 13 years old. And so he started young, and I felt like it was my obligation to start young and get involved in the Cheyenne Sundance. And so that's what I chose to do. That was my way of continuing the ceremonial life of my family, but most of all for my people. And so Oca Hater here is in the ceremonial paint, but here too we wear our willows and sage sometimes. We wear this crown on our head, and we wear this willow on our body when we worship in our ceremony. And this willow is a sacred plant, a sacred item that we use in the ceremony. We have to have it. And then the way Oca Hater chose to become a priest, Episcopalian priest or Episcopalian member in the beginning, he actually saw how the Cheyenne Sundance paralleled with the Episcopalian way of prayer, the religion. And he saw that and he put it together. And that's why he accepted the Episcopalian denomination and the way he wanted to worship and change his religion, that he mixed it together and it paralleled together. And so when we think about Christ, how Christ went through the streets, was dragging his the cross, then what did he wear on his head? He wore a crown of thorns. And this is the same representation of that. This crown that we wear in our ceremony reflects the same suffering, the same image of Christ when he was going through the streets with that thorn crown on his head. So this willow, this ceremonial hat that he wears in the Sundance, that's parallel to his way and beliefs. He later became a saint, an ordained saint at the Episcopalian. And so here's Jenny Pendleton, who Oca Hater was her father. And so Jenny Pendleton we always call her grandma, and she's gone now. But here I thought of Jenny in regards to being directly related as a descendant of Oca Hater. And I was very fortunate to have her as my grandmother to really remember a lot of what was going on when Oca Hater was imprisoned. And she talked about his drawings. She said they still had some in their family, the original drawings that Oca Hater had created, and they take care of them. She said they had them in the trunk. And so I remember that story by visiting with her. Next. And here again, I drew Jenny with her scarf on. as an artist, I try to depict and remember some of my conversations I have with my elders, and and I highlight them in my own drawings or the way I view them. And so this one here is titled "Tell Me Grandmother." Tell me, grandmother. And she sits there and she'll stand with her cane. The cane is a stick of authority. The cane is a stick of storytelling. When they get up and talk, they always use their stick when they recount stories of history, recount stories of the societies, the star stories, the Star Clan. And so when you hear the elder get up and speak, no one is to talk. You have to listen till they get through, and they talk and tell you a story, and they're going to relate valuable information to you. Here in the photograph that I put next to in this slide is Elizabeth Whiteshield, and this is Theodora Pendleton. These are the daughters of Jenny, and this is the granddaughter, Theda Ann Whiteshirt, and she's the granddaughter of Jenny, and she was the Arapaho princess. So their family was very involved in the Cheyenne traditional way as well as the Arapaho. And so Theda represented the Arapaho nation as an Arapaho princess. And then these are the sisters, Theodora and Elizabeth. And here is Grandma Jenny, who's a direct descendant of David Pendleton, Oca Hater. And so we still have these descendants that lives in these communities of these ledger artists. And they're very important because they hold these stories that they remember that these ledger artists told them. And when you can sit down and visit with some of the lineal descendants still alive today, that's an honor, because they're going to tell you who they were, and they're going to add value of things we don't even know historically about their information as family. Here's a contemporary drawing I did of the Cheyenne Ladies. The Cheyenne Ladies is very important to us in our community. They're very involved in teepee making society. They're storytellers, they're providers for the children, and they're mothers to all. And so I depicted this drawing of the Dentillion dress here, and the cowrie shell, the Dentillion and the cowrie shell, and then the belts that they wore, and then the crown, the silver belt that they wear here down here is always on the right side. And this silver crown belt, the drop is what they call it. It represents Custer Saber, and there's a special story about that. And that's why the women honor him. They wear this drop in representation to Custer Saber. And if you were to see a young lady when she's out there in her regalia dancing, and you call her over and say, "Tell me, why do you wear this?" And sometimes I would get a response, "Oh, I don't know. We were just told we have to wear it this way. And we were just told that's the way we wear it." And I said, "There's a story about this and why we do it." So everything has meaning in how we wear things, how we make things, how we honor things. And that's the way these drawings did. They depicted the actual count of the way they honored each one in these societies, and even in the women. So these are the 4 contemporary ladies that I did for a drawing about 10 years ago. Next. Here's another drawing I did in 2003, and it's titled Cheyenne Cordy. And you see this man and this woman courting one another. He gets off his horse, and it's a full moonlight. And that's the time they court, was full moonlight. And then they would go over to the girl's teepee, and they would give a gift to their parents. "I'm here to court your daughter." And they would allow them to court, but they would have to cover themselves with blankets in order to do that. And that was their privacy. And as they sat and talked, then they were embracing and communicating with one another. And this is the blue moon of the full moon of the night of courting. And so this depicts the the eagle, sometimes the water bird, then the quarter moon, and then the 4 dots represents the 4 directions. And then the blue on the bottom reflects the moon, but it also represents the rivers. So that's some of my contemporary drawings on the horse, and this warrior getting off horse and courting. And it's amazing that, you know, for me, when I think of things like this, I'm not just my personal, I think of them warrior artists that were depicting their time in courting. And that's what I drew here, was to kind of duplicate that same image. Next. Here is the drawing I did for Fort Marion. And this drawing is on exhibit as part of this exhibit here at the Cummer Museum. And I did this drawing depicting the warriors that were in prison, 31 of them. And then also highlighted the woman that went with her husband to be in prison. She loved her husband so much that she said, I'm going to go with you to prison. You can't leave me, and I'm not going to leave you. So she was the only woman. There was another woman that went along too, but she was the one that went along with her husband to become imprisoned at Fort Marion. And so I highlighted her in the center, and I depicted the 31 warriors, the chiefs, and they all wear red and blue blankets. And if you count them, there's 31. And so there's that were in prison. This is probably Oca Hater, Bear's Heart, and Minimic, Eagle's Head. And then this could be another chief that was in prison. And so she was married to one of the warriors, and there's a story about her as well. And then we have a lot of history on her. And it depicted her own actual accounts when she would actually go into battle with her husband. And so I depicted the train, the train they rode down there. This train was unique to them. They never rode a train before. And so can you imagine getting on a vehicle that pushed out steam and they blew the loud whistle? And so they were imprisoned in these box cars. They were shackled with chains, and they were shackled with ankle chains, and then handcuffs around their wrists, and the chains were bolted down and locked to these floor of the train, and that kept them from escaping. The only time they were allowed to get up and get out is when they would stop, and they would either switch the tracks to a different location and go in a different direction. And so they were still confined to these box cars, and they were shackled around their ankles and then their wrists. And I think about that. And so this was the box cars that they were riding to Florida, a place they'd never been. But here I depicted the lifestyle that they had before they were in prison. They were used to hunting the buffalo. They were used to hunting the pronghorn, the antelope. And then here this guy shoots him twice with an arrow. So these are warriors that are hunting the buffalo and the antelope. And then here's another warrior in the middle. And then here's the train tracks, the railroad ties. And then here's the steamboat that they rode in when they got on the river. And so I depicted that as well. And then here is a chief with his shield, and then other chiefs with their headdress bonnets. And here's the teepee down here, the encampment of some of their teepees that they lived in when they were back home. Here at the agency where they were camping at Darlington Agency, and other areas of our districts that they camped in. And then right in the center is the Cheyenne chief symbol. And the Cheyenne chief symbol is worn on our Cheyenne chief blankets, the red and the blue. And you see, I didn't color the faces or the hair, and I left them blank, just like the ledger artist left those horses blank. And why did I choose to do that? Because I wanted them to represent a ghostly image. an image that is a spirit, and they're still alive, but their spirit is being hidden. Their spirit is being taken away. They don't know where they're going. They have fear of, am I going to live or am I going to die? So that was the kind of the human physical appearance, and then the ghostly appearance of transparency, seeing through them and seeing them like a ghost image. That's why I didn't color them. And as artists, we always think about what we're doing as far as our creation and a piece of art. And then that was my story. And then it's told that we're to cross 4 rivers. And when we cross 4 rivers, that means that we're gonna come to our end of life. That's what the Cheyennes believe. And so can you imagine crossing the 4 rivers from here to Florida? That was in their minds, and that was in their thought process. And so when they became imprisoned, they were allowed to live. They rejoiced by being creative in their art. They were celebrating that they were still alive. Next. Here's another image that I did in 2000, a contemporary ledger drawing style image that I did. And I wanted to really set the bold colors, the fine detail of Cheyenne. The horses, stallion, see, he's riding the stallion. He's not riding the male horse, female horse. And then the woman, she's riding another horse that's female, because she's female. And the way I entitled this drawing is, it's called Captured. So he goes away and he goes on a war party or goes into the camp, and he captures this daughter of a chief of that tribe that he encountered, and he's taking her home. And so that's why he's leading her, because she's in prison. She's his captive now, and eventually will probably become one of his wives or his wife, because the chiefs, they had many wives. Some of them were always sisters, 2 or 3. And so that was just the way the Cheyennes did it, as well as other Plains tribes. And then here he's got a vest on, a belt, and then his leggings, and then his moccasins. And then they always, when they went into battle, they would tie their horse's tail up and wrap cloth around it. And that was to keep the horse from getting tangled up in the sagebrush. That's why they did that. They didn't just do it for decoration. And then here, she's got eagle feathers tied to her horse's tail, and so does him. And the colors of her are pink and yellow, Cheyenne pink and red. And then she has a crown on. I threw that crown in there as a contemporary princess of today's princess, just like I mentioned, Theta Whiteshirt being an Arapaho princess. She had a crown on, a silver one. This is a beaded one. And then in my ledger style drawing, I don't put hoofs on my horses. And that's my trademark. Because when someone sees this drawing and see the way that I drew it, the style that I did it, they say, oh, that's Gordon Yellowman's artwork, because he don't put hoofs on his horses. So we as ledger artists always have a glyph or a unique way of how we produce ledger art. And if you look for things like that, you'll start to recognize them. See, here's another family image. This is a family, a husband and wife going out of camp or returning back home. And you see the little coat here. He's a little stallion that belongs to this one. And so he's always going to follow his mother, and he's never going to be lost. So that's a Cheyenne chief on another horse style of my drawings. And I had to depict the little stallion. I thought he was really unique. And that's what makes this drawing stand out, unique, the detail of this little horse. Okay, next. Here's another image that I thought of, the buffalo, the scenes in the ledger drawings. And they're hunting buffalo. And then they're also, showing a lot of the buffalo hunts. And this is kind of more prehistoric, historic. And then, many Plains tribes, as well as the northern tribes, the the Sioux and the other tribes that live up north, they really believe that they honor the white buffalo, the sacred white buffalo. And when you see a white buffalo, it's a blessing. And when a white buffalo is born in the herd, that's a special blessing to all of us as Native people. It's rare, but it does happen. And so that's why I depicted this little white buffalo calf following his mother. And, you know, as you see it, it's going the opposite. It's going from left to right. It's not going from right to left. And so I depicted that just to show that, you know, as my contemporary way of art, I can do things a little different as well. Next. And here is another contemporary drawing that I did of ledger style. And as you notice, what do you notice in this drawing? This drawing's got hoofs. And the reason why I depicted that is because when I watched a movie with my daughter, it was called The Wizard of Oz. And in that, there's a horse in there, and it's called a horse of a different color. He says it's a horse of a different color. So I painted this horse purple because in that show, that horse was changing color. And so this painting was entitled that, Horse of a Different Color. And so when I really put this, because we didn't have purple horses. And so when I did this image, that's why I did it, because of that movie, The Wizard of Oz. And so I put hoofs on him because you saw in that movie, the horse was prancing around, dancing when he was walking. And so he was really high spirited. And then he was depicted changing colors every time you'd see him. Here we have the lightning bolt on the horse's legs. And that represents agility and speed. This horse is fast. He can travel fast, just like the lightning bolt. Instant, just spontaneous. And it's power, it's powerful. And that's what that represents. And here's the sun, here's the quarter moon, the full sun, the earth and the moon. And then here's the quarter moon, like I said, the yellow. And the Cheyenne Warrior painted his face red when he go into battle. And he has his shield. I depicted the eagle feathers in this shield, and then the trailers down the bottom of the shield. And this shield protected him. And then I depicted the rawhide braid on the bridle, the horse, that the rawhide braid is braided like that. Then he has the silver cones here on his hair, his scalp lock, and he has the spear. And so that's what I depicted, was this horse of a different color. Next. I think that's kind of the last of the images. And as a ledger artist, I'm very honored to have a gift. And it was my purpose to learn how to do ledger art and study it. And so I just created my own contemporary style. And some of my images, you see, the one that I depicted, Jenny, Grandma Jenny, Tell Me Grandmother. I actually depicted another drawing for a book called Tell Me Grandmother. And it's one of my ledger drawings that's in this that I just showed you. And it's the one that's called Captured. That's on a book cover. And the title of the book is Tell Me Grandmother. And so far I've created 4 pieces of art on book jackets, book covers, and the ledger style. And my latest one was just last year. It's called Sand Creek. It's called Sand Creek. And that's on the book jacket of an author that wrote the book that just came out, and it's already won several awards. And so my gift as a ledger artist is parallel to the gift that those ledger artists that were imprisoned. It's the same artistic talent that they had. but they had a reason, they had justification to do their drawings. And then when I looked at the drawings and think about what's going on in their minds when they're during this confinement, that was their freedom. And the only way they were going to maintain their freedom was to do these drawings. They're no longer in prison. And it's just like me, when I sit down and get ready to do my drawings, it's very important that that's my escape in reality. From reality, I go into my mode of creation. And so at this time, I want to kind of come to a conclusion. I want to go into the Q&A session. And it's called, the question here is called, why is it called ledger art? And the reason why it's called ledger art is it's because these books were captured from the military soldiers back in the 1800s. And the earliest known book that I have is 1874. And so when the warriors would capture these books from the military officers, because the military officers would have to write in these books, these ledger books, their everyday garrison. They had to record everything they were doing on a daily basis. And so they would write their reports in these ledger books that were given to them by the government, the soldiers, the army. And so these officers had these books. And then when they eventually were stolen, I guess, or captured from the army officers during battle or during raids of their encampments, these warriors would pick up these ledger books, the officers' books, and they were called ledger books. And then they would start drawing their drawings in these ledger books over some of the writings in those garrisons of recordings of everyday reports. And then eventually, you start to have traders, mercantile, and these traders would write down their sales daily and what they traded. And then they would get the ledger books from these traders as well, because they were documenting inventory of what they sold and what they had. And so the warriors would get these ledger books from the mercantile people, and that's how it became called ledger art, because the art is in these ledger books. And you'll see a lot of the ledger books that's on sale on auction. You find them, the old bank ledger books, they're real thick. And so if you find them ledger books, then ledger artists will use them today. And that's how it became known as ledger art, because it's associated directly with the ledger book. There's another question. What is, did these warrior artists have a tradition of drawing and creating even before relocated? Yes, all of these warrior artists had a talent, and they began depicting their images on hides. That was first, but if you go back, we did images on rock art, cave art, petroglyph art, and it transitioned to material. It transitioned to buffalo hide, painting the images on buffalo hides, and then it transitioned to canvas, and then it transitioned to ledger art, paper, ledger books, and that was the paper. But yeah, these warriors had that was the only way of documenting their history, was through art. The next question is, what is my artistic training? My artistic training is, I began doing art in high school, and I never really took any formal art until my senior year. And then from my senior year, I went on to a commercial and graphic art school. It was a 2-year program, and I completed the program in 1 year, because I wanted to become a commercial graphic artist. And then from there, I got a scholarship from Oklahoma State University. And the only program that they had that the scholarship was given to me is I had to take architectural technology classes. And that's where I studied, was to become an architect. But in fact, it gave me formal training in how to do designs, how to design schematic designs of buildings. And I used watercolor. And that's how I learned how to use watercolor and how to design. And then I went on to teach art classes at Southwestern Oklahoma State University for the art department under our tribal college. And so that's some of my formal experience that I have as an artist. And on top of that, I research these ledger artists, these ledger books. So I have formal research abilities or knowledge of these books. That's my background in art. What I did was research the warrior artists for this exhibition. Is these drawings that's in the exhibition, they're from the collection of the Silberman collection. And they were housed, or they are housed, at the Cowboy Hall of Fame National Museum in Oklahoma City. And so when I went over there to look at the drawings, the Silberman collection, I became familiar with that collection. And then I start talking to the director there, and we start having conversations. And then that's how I start researching. Him and I and another co-curator, she was involved in a lot of research for these warrior artists. But what I brought to this exhibition is the actual knowledge of family history of these warriors, the families that live in today, the descendants in our communities. And they are surviving oral histories. They're actual historical accounts of their experiences in prison and where they came from, their homelands. One says, is my ledger art available to purchase? Yes, it is. And I'm hoping to get some ledger. I don't have a website, but I'm starting to develop that. But if you contact me, I can show you some of the images that I have, and I can create originals. The next question is, are new generations of Cheyenne artists learning about ledger drawings? Yes, they are, and they're learning about the ledger drawings through these types of exhibitions. When we can highlight what is ledger art, what does it mean, what's the value of ledger art, when we can highlight it in these exhibitions such as the Cummer Museum, that's the educational learning tool that's going to get attention. And these are younger kids are going to want to learn how to either draw the ledger style, and we have classes. We give them colored pencils, we give them ledger books, we buy them and say, here, draw. And so when we go to our schools, I encourage them to start drawing. And when I teach them how to draw the ledger style, they have a greater understanding. But with this Cummer Museum and the establishment of a website, it's going to become a research-based type research area where everybody's going to contribute through comments, through their research, and it's just going to add more educational materials that kids can learn, college students can learn, any Cheyenne, Arapaho can learn, and any tribe. And when they can learn that and have access to that kind of a tool in education, that's going to be real impressive, and it's needed. And I certainly look forward to that opportunity. Okay, is there any more questions? You can contact me through the Cummer Museum, or I can, provide my email. It's better for me to receive email because I do email more than I do other things. Like I said, for me, I'm not really on any social media, and I have a reason for that. I have a personal reason as to why I choose not to do social media. In our traditions as Cheyenne people, our customs and our ways of how we do things, if someone's going to come see you and ask you for knowledge, ask you for advice, ask you for information, That might be ceremonial information, might be traditional ways of how we do things in the community. They have to bring you an offering, and they come to your house and they give you an offering, and they put it in front of you, and they tell you, I'm here and I need this information, or I need your help. And once you accept that offering, then you're obligated to fulfill their request of whatever they're asking you. And so you can't do that through social media. And so they know where I live, or I tell them where I live, and they'll come and ask me for help. So that's very strong customs of our ways, and you can't do that through social media. They have to come see you physically. And so that's kind of how people contact me, and they know where I live and they can come see me. And people do come and see me with offerings. And one of the questions was, how does ledger art compare to pictographs? Pictographs is more going to be images of not so details. They're just going to be images of a handprint, images of a symbol, maybe an animal. But in ledger art, it depicts details. It depicts actual accounts of the historical experience that artist is having. And they're depicting everything around them, their surroundings. And you can't do that in a pictograph. I originally started working in oils, but it became the process was too long for me. It wouldn't dry. And I went to acrylics, and then that worked for me well, acrylics, water-based, and then I went to watercolor. And I chose watercolor because it's a fast medium, and the medium dries so fast that you don't have to wait on it to dry. It dries instantly. And you don't have control of the watercolor. You don't have control of the water. It does what it's going to do, and you control it by hoping that it's going to fall within your boundaries of what you're depicting in your art. It's just faster for me. And so I can't wait for it to dry. I let the watercolor do its thing, and it dries, and I'm on the next step. So it's faster for me. It's unique. I love working with watercolor because you don't know what it's going to do. And you have to go light to dark. You can't go dark to light. And these are just some of the techniques that you learn. I learned how to use toothbrushes. I learned how to use washes. I learned how to use other ways that I made up on my own to get the images of what I was trying to depict, the style, the colors. And so that's how I learned. It's all by experience. It's all by experimenting with what you can do with watercolor. And I love it. Any more questions? I want to thank everybody and the Cummer Museum staff, Holly and Emily, for putting this together, and the curators that were involved in this. They really had a lot of contribution to this to make it successful. I thank you for this opportunity, and I wish you a good night. And I'm looking forward to more talks, having conversations on Cheyenne Ledger Art.